A camera does not know it is filming the last minutes of someone's life. It just runs. It catches a stairwell, a hallway, a departure gate, a live broadcast feed, and it keeps recording long after the moment stops making sense. There is no ghost in any of this, no supernatural hand guiding the story. What is left behind is simpler and harder to sit with, footage that became the only witness to something no one can fully explain. Some of these recordings solved nothing. A person walks into frame, and then, in a way that still resists explanation, walks out of every camera that ever caught them. Others solved everything, and the horror is that they solved it in public, in real time, in front of an audience that never asked to see it. What ties them together is not the supernatural. It is the ordinary machinery of surveillance and home video, pointed at an ordinary morning, catching something it was never built to hold. Here are 5 of the most disturbing encounters ever caught on camera. It is April 2006, a little after 1 in the morning, at the South Campus Gateway Complex near Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. A security camera watches an escalator that carries people up toward a bar called the Ugly Tuna Saloona. At 1:15 a.m., it records a 27-year-old medical student named Brian Schaffer riding up that escalator with 2 friends on the last night of his life that anyone can account for. Schaffer had reason to be out. He was a second-year student at Ohio State's medical school, about to leave the next day on a trip to Miami with his girlfriend, and the night had started as an ordinary round of bar hopping to mark the beginning of spring break. He and a friend named William Florence made their way along the strip and ended up at the Ugly Tuna, a bar on the upper level of the Gateway building, an area the complex had wired with security cameras because of concerns about crime nearby. The cameras did their job. They caught Schaffer arriving. They caught him inside over the following hour. And at around 1:55 a.m., they caught him outside the bar's entrance, talking briefly with 2 young women, saying something to them, and then stepping out of the camera's view. The bar was closing. People were filtering out and heading home. And that is where the record simply stops, because the footage never caught Brian Schaffer coming back down. There is video of him going up the escalator into the bar. There is no video of him ever coming down it. Investigators who reviewed the recordings frame by frame have said they can state with near total certainty that he did not leave the way he came in. The main entrance was the way in, and it was watched. He was there, on camera, at closing time, and then he was not anywhere the cameras could see. That is the part that has kept the case alive for 20 years. The building is not a sealed box. There were other doors. One route near where he was last seen led toward a construction area with an exterior exit, and it is possible that a man could have found his way out through there, though doing it while intoxicated in the dark would not have been simple. Some of those areas had cameras that may have missed him. Some did not. What investigators could not do was produce a single frame showing Schaffer walking out of that building alive by any exit on any camera. The search that followed was enormous by the standards of a single missing person. Police pulled footage from the neighboring bars along the strip and found nothing. They searched sewers and drains beneath the complex. They interviewed the people who had been with him, and most of them submitted to polygraph tests and passed. Florence, the friend he had been drinking with, declined to take one, a detail that fed years of online speculation, but never produced any evidence against him. Tips came in for years. None of them led anywhere. The human cost of the case did not stop with Brian. His father, Randy Schaffer, spent the remaining years of his life searching for his son and pushing authorities to take missing persons cases more seriously. In 2008, 2 years after Brian vanished, Randy died in a freak accident, struck by a falling tree branch. He never learned what happened to his son. Before he died, though, he had lobbied for changes to how Ohio handled missing adult cases, and those efforts outlived him. 2 decades on, there is no confirmed sighting of Brian Schaffer anywhere. No body has been recovered. The theories range from an accidental death somewhere in or around that building to a deliberate walk into a new life, and none of them can be proven or ruled out. What remains is the footage. A young man riding an escalator up into a crowded bar, stepping out of frame at closing time, and never once appearing on the cameras that should have caught him leaving. It is November 22nd, 1963, in Dealey Plaza, Dallas, Texas, a little before 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Abraham Zapruder, a Dallas dressmaker, has climbed onto a concrete pedestal along Elm Street with his Amy Bell and Howell camera, hoping to get a clear shot of the president's motorcade as it passes below. There is nothing unusual about the setup. Zapruder is one of hundreds of people lining the route that morning, and he is doing what plenty of them are doing, holding up a home movie camera to catch a few seconds of history, a wave from a passing car, something to keep. He has no way of knowing that the next 26 seconds of film will outlive him, outlive the Warren Commission, outlive every person standing near him on that pedestal. The motorcade turns onto Elm Street and comes into view. Zapruder's camera is running. 486 frames pass through the gate in under half a minute. Somewhere in the middle of that stretch, a shot rings out and strikes President John F. Kennedy. Zapruder keeps filming. A few seconds later, at frame 313, the fatal headshot occurs, caught in full on the film. Zapruder does not stop the camera. He does not look away. The lens simply keeps recording what is in front of it, the way it was built to do. Witnesses who were near him that day described him as visibly shaken once the motorcade had passed and the shooting had registered. He did not try to sell the film that afternoon or hide it away. Instead, he had it developed that same day, aware of what he was holding even before anyone else had seen it. The footage cost him something to carry. He later said the images haunted him, and he had nightmares about what his camera had recorded. Life magazine acquired the film shortly after. The company paid Zapruder a reported sum for the rights, and he attached a condition to the deal that says a great deal about how he understood what he had filmed. He did not want frame 313, the frame of the head shot itself, published. When the magazine printed selected stills beginning with its issue dated late November 1963, that frame was withheld, giving the public its first look at individual moments from Dealey Plaza without the single most graphic one among them. But the full moving picture, all 26 seconds of it playing in sequence, was not shown to a general television audience for more than a decade. It stayed largely out of public broadcast until March 1975, when it aired on Geraldo Rivera's late-night program Good Night America on ABC, introduced with the help of assassination researchers. For roughly 12 years, the only Americans who had seen the film in motion were investigators, journalists with direct access, and the Zapruder family itself. When it finally played on television, the reaction was immediate, and it reshaped public argument about the assassination almost overnight. That gap mattered, because in the meantime, the film had already become the spine of the official investigation into the assassination. The Warren Commission examined it frame by frame, using it to help establish the timing and trajectory of the shots. Later investigations, including the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the 1970s, returned to it again and again. It has been described, without much argument, as the most closely examined piece of amateur film ever made. Every frame has been studied, enlarged, measured, and cross-referenced against eyewitness testimony for decades, and it remains the reference point against which every competing account of those seconds is tested. What makes the Zapruder film different from almost anything else in this list is its ordinariness before the fact. The other recordings here involve people whose behavior on camera already hints that something is wrong. Zapruder's film starts as nothing more than a man testing his aim on a passing car. There is no warning built into the first several seconds. The camera was pointed at a celebration, not a crime scene, and it only became the second because it never stopped rolling. A home movie meant for a family reel became the single most scrutinized piece of amateur footage in American history, and it did so by accident, 26 seconds at a time. It is March 22nd, 2011, aboard the Disney Wonder, a cruise ship sailing through the Pacific waters off the coast of Mexico. Somewhere on the crew decks, a security camera is running the way it runs every hour of every voyage, recording areas that almost nobody ever bothers to review. Rebecca Coriam was 24 years old, from Chester, Cheshire in England. She worked aboard the Wonder as a children's entertainer, the kind of job that put her in front of families all day and left her, off shift, moving through the crew-only spaces most passengers never saw. She had been with Disney Cruise Line for months by that point, well-liked by the people she worked alongside, the sort of young woman whose disappearance would later be described by everyone who knew her as completely out of character. The footage from that morning shows her at approximately 5:45 a.m., alone in a crew lounge, using one of the ship's internal phones. She is visibly distressed. Whatever the call is about, it has unsettled her enough that a fellow crew member notices and walks over to check on her. Coriam indicates that she is fine. It is a brief exchange, nothing dramatic on its face. She finishes the call and moves out of the frame. No camera on the ship ever records her again. She missed her shift later that morning. When she couldn't be found in her cabin or anywhere else on board, the crew began searching the vessel. She wasn't there. The ship carried on toward its next port with a missing crew member, and no clear account of what had happened to her between that early morning phone call and the moment someone finally noticed she was gone. What followed only deepened the confusion. The response to her disappearance was slow, and her family would later argue, badly mishandled from the start. The investigation, when it came, was startling in its limits. A single detective from the Royal Bahamas Police Force was assigned to the case, flown out to meet the ship when it returned to port in Los Angeles. He spent about a day aboard the Wonder and interviewed only a handful of the roughly 950 crew members and none of the thousands of passengers who had been on board. By the time anyone with authority reached the ship, whatever might have been learned in the first hours had long since slipped away. Jurisdiction became its own obstacle. The Disney Wonder was registered in the Bahamas, which meant the Bahamas held nominal authority over any investigation into what happened aboard it. But the ship sailed out of an American port under an American corporate parent, which pulled American interest into the case as well. The result was a gap that no single agency fully owned. No body was ever recovered. No definitive account of what happened after that phone call was ever established. Her parents pushed hard against the story they were being told. They have said that Disney officials described Rebecca on the footage as drunk and enraged, banging her head against the walls, and that the video they were eventually able to see showed nothing of the kind. That discrepancy between the account they were given and the images they saw became one of the central grievances of a family who felt they were managing a corporation's reputation as much as searching for their daughter. In 2016, the family settled a civil claim against Disney out of court. Coriam's family, back in Cheshire, has spent years since pushing for answers that have not come. They have raised the case with British officials, called for changes to how disappearances at sea are investigated, and continued to ask the same basic questions that were never resolved in 2011. Who she was speaking to on that phone, why she was so distressed, and what happened to her in the hours after the last camera caught her walking away. This isn't a case where a theory can responsibly fill the gap. It is simply a case where the evidence stops. What's left is the footage itself, a young woman on a ship phone before dawn, upset about something no one can name, reassuring a coworker that she is fine, and then stepping out of view of the last camera that would ever record her. More than a decade on, that clip is still the final confirmed sighting of Rebecca Coriam. It is September 20th, 1988, near Belen, New Mexico, a little before mid-morning. There is no security camera in this story, not at the start. There is only a road, State Road 47, and a 19-year-old named Tara Calico riding her bicycle along it the way she did almost every day. The camera in this case comes later, and when it does, it makes the whole thing worse. Calico left her home that morning for a routine ride, telling her mother she would be back by noon because she had plans that afternoon. She never came home. When she didn't return, her mother drove the route looking for her and found nothing but scattered pieces of Calico's belongings along the roadside, parts of a Sony Walkman and a cassette tape, dropped in a line that her family came to believe she might have left deliberately, a trail marked in the only way she could. Her bicycle was never recovered. Witnesses reported having seen a vehicle following slowly behind her that morning, and then the trail, like Tara herself, simply ended. The case might have stayed a quiet, local tragedy. One more person vanished from a rural road, if not for what turned up 9 months later and more than 1,000 miles away. On June 15, 1989, in the parking lot of a convenience store in Port St. Joe, Florida, a woman found a Polaroid photograph lying on the ground. The image showed a young woman and a young boy, side by side, both bound and gagged with black duct tape, lying on what looked like the interior of a van. The woman who found the photo said it had been left in a spot where a white cargo van had been parked, driven by a man she could not identify. That photograph is the reason Tara Calico's name is still known, because when it was made public, people who had followed her disappearance looked at the young woman in it and saw Tara. There was a detail in the frame that deepened the fear. A paperback book resembling one from a series she was known to read, resting near her. And there was a hard fact built into the film itself. Polaroid confirmed that the specific film stock used to take the picture had not been available for sale until May 1989, which meant the photograph could not have been staged years earlier. Whoever the young woman was, the image of her, bound and gagged, had been taken recently, long after Tara vanished. What the photograph could not do was settle who she was. It was analyzed by some of the most capable forensic examiners of the era, and they did not agree. Scotland Yard, examining the image, concluded that the young woman was Tara Calico. Los Alamos National Laboratory studied the same photograph and came to the opposite conclusion, stating that the woman was not her. A subsequent FBI examination was inconclusive. 3 respected analyses, 3 different results, applied to a single degraded Polaroid found in a parking lot by chance. The boy in the picture was never conclusively identified either, and a theory linking him to another missing New Mexico child was later undermined when that child's remains were found elsewhere. The photograph has never been fully explained. The van and its driver were never identified. And in the years since, other blurry images have surfaced claiming to show Tara in captivity, none of them ever authenticated. The case sat unsolved for decades, worked and reworked by investigators who kept returning to that single found photograph as the one piece of physical evidence that might connect a vanished New Mexico teenager to a van in a Florida parking lot. In recent years, authorities have said the investigation reached a point where they believed there was enough to bring to prosecutors for review, though the details have remained under court seal. What remains is a photograph nobody meant to leave behind. A young woman and a boy, bound, staring at a lens held by someone who was never found, developed on film that proved the image was recent, discovered by accident on the ground of a parking lot 1,000 miles from where Tara Calico last rode her bicycle into a morning she never came back from. It is August 26, 2015, approximately 6:45 a.m. Eastern Time, at Bridgewater Plaza on Smith Mountain Lake, near Monada, Virginia. WDBJ, a CBS affiliate out of Roanoke, is running a live morning segment. Reporter Allison Parker, 24 years old, stands with a microphone. Cameraman Adam Ward, 27, films beside her. They are interviewing Vicki Gardner, the executive director of the local Chamber of Commerce, about tourism ahead of the lake's 50th anniversary. It is the kind of segment that airs on local news every day and draws no attention afterward. Partway through the interview, Vester Lee Flanagan II approaches. Flanagan is a former WDBJ employee, fired from the station roughly 2 years earlier, who had worked on air under the name Bryce Williams. He raises a handgun and opens fire on the 3 of them during the live broadcast. Parker and Ward are killed. Gardner is shot as well and survives after surgery. The attack happens in front of a rolling broadcast camera, and for a few seconds, before the station can cut away, viewers watching their morning news at home see the moment begin to unfold in real time. What sets this case apart from the others is that it was recorded twice, from 2 opposing points of view. Ward's camera was live at the instant of the attack, transmitting the segment to television sets across the region as it happened. Separately, Flanagan had mounted a camera on himself before the shooting and filmed the attack from his own perspective. He posted that footage to his personal social media accounts afterward, before the platforms took it down. 2 recordings of the same few seconds exist because 2 people were filming for entirely different reasons. One for the morning news, one for himself. This isn't a detail included for shock value. It matters because it changed how the event was covered and recovered in the years after, and how footage like this gets discussed, shared, and in some cases deliberately kept alive online long after the people connected to it have asked for it to stop circulating. After the shooting, Flanagan fled the scene in a rental car. A manhunt followed. Hours later, as state police closed in on Interstate 66 in Northern Virginia, his vehicle ran off the road. Officers found him inside with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and he died that day. In the years since, Allison Parker's father, Andy Parker, has become one of the most visible advocates in the country on gun violence and on the handling of violent footage online, campaigning to have the recordings of his daughter's death removed from the platforms that keep hosting them. Rather than retreat from the case, the families of both victims have stayed public and active, insisting on being the ones who define how it is remembered. What remains is a routine local broadcast that turned, in the space of a few seconds, into one of the most thoroughly documented acts of violence in American television history, caught twice over, from two cameras that were never supposed to be recording the same thing. 5 cameras, 5 recordings, and in every case a machine that simply kept running. Some of these tapes closed the door on what happened. Most of them only proved how little a camera can explain on its own. What they share is the same quiet fact underneath, a lens pointed at an ordinary moment, holding on to something long after the people in the frame were gone.